Alright y'all, welcome back to the channel and do some more waterfowl patterning, and today I've got a really interesting loading to run and we're going to put it through the paces through a number of different chokes and see how it actually performs and what choke constriction it really likes. I know it's end of July, middle of summertime here, and we're doing waterfowl stuff, pretty much directly opposite of waterfowl season, but I happened to find these old school shells in a bargain bin the other day, so I just had to bring them out here and run them just to see what they could do, because I think there's a real possibility we see some nice results, even though they are a little bit of an older shell. So either which way, I'm definitely looking forward to testing them and seeing what they might be capable of doing. Before the shells I've got, I just so happened to stumble across some of these the other day in a small town gun shop bargain bin. These are some old Winchester Super Steel loads. Apparently they're a non-toxic Magnum Goose load. That's a 12 gauge, 3-inch, 1¼ ounce payload of copper plated steel triple B shot. We've tested triple B a couple times in like a 410 home defense style load, but I don't know that we've ever ran it with steel waterfowl stuff, nor do I think we've ever ran a copper plated steel loading either. So these should be rather interesting. It's an old school box art. You can see all the like new fancy stamps all over it to grab attention. I like the camouflage packaging on it, although it's been a little difficult to date these shells. So if anybody has a good reference point as to kind of the era these are from, they remind me of something kind of early to mid 2000s, but the logo that's used on here, I don't know if it's retro inspired or what, but the logo kind of feels like 90s era. So somebody let me know when these came out, because I know they had the hex shot as well. These are not the hex shot, so they should be something rather unique and interesting to test out. And here's an up-close look quickly at one of the ends of the shells, where you can see that nice shiny copper-plated triple B pellet sitting right up top there. So they are in fact nice shiny copper-plated. As for the setup that we're going to be running, I brought out my Remington 1187. It's got a 28-inch barrel on it, and when we've ran waterfowl stuff, this is usually a pretty good patterning gun with a vast majority of shells. If it's a decent load, this thing usually shoots it pretty well. But we've also got the full set of choke range out here today to run them through as well. Everything from cylinder to improved cylinder, modified, and full chokes. All just your standard stock flush style stuff here. So we should get a good idea on what choke constriction area that these might actually prefer. They're a larger steel pellet, so maybe the little more open chokes might work. But we've got all four of your common things to start with as far as stock chokes, and we'll see what they prefer. As for our test today, we're running it the same as we usually would. I've got 4 duck targets lined up at 40 yards with the chronograph as well to get the velocity, since those don't have a claim on them. So we'll get you guys a view of those targets. We'll start with the cylinder, then move to the improved cylinder, mod, and then full choke, putting them all side by side, and we'll see what they actually like. So let's throw the cylinder bore in the gun, and we'll start moving up in choke constriction, taking our shots, and see how these old Winchester Super Steel, copper-plated steel triple B shells actually perform. All right, so quick velocity run through, especially since these did not have a boss claim on them, but it seemed like averaging throughout the mid 1300s or so, plus or minus a little bit. The first shot through the cylinder bore gave us 1301. The second shot through the improved cylinder gave us 1346. The third shot through the modified gave us 1331. And the final shot through the full choke jumped up a little bit in velocity to 1396. So that was definitely our fastest reading of the day. But that puts us at an average of 1343. So these are probably supposed to have a 1325 or 1350 claim, something about like that. And that's more than enough for a triple B steel pellet out to 40 yards. That's a 19 caliber projectile. So you're carrying plenty of energy for larger ducks and geese territory for these, absolutely. But let's look at our patterns and see how they perform through our 4 different chokes. All right, so here we have all four of our targets side by side. Obviously, I can't get an up close view of all of them in an active camera frame at once, real nice and close together. So I will pop up a few pictures all side by side of these directly on the screen so you can see what the difference really is. Starting from left to right, we have cylinder, improved cylinder, modified, and full. We can definitely tell that the tighter the choke we got, the more condensed our patterns got. The cylinder bore is noticeably more open. I would say that is a out to 40-yard combination. Definitely if you're hunting over decoys or something at 20, 25, 30 yards, that's the choke you're going to want to go with, because between our improved cylinder, mod, and full, we really started getting tighter main core areas of the pattern. But I kind of really like about that modified choke constriction on average. Somewhere between improved cylinder and modified, I think that provides a pretty good happy medium where you've got a lot of them right through the core while having a little more breathing room as well, versus the full choke having a really condensed little core area right below the duck and starting to scatter more pellets around the edges. But now we'll do a quick overview up close of each of these patterns. This is the cylinder bore. Dead duck, yes, absolutely, but we're probably looking at more goose territory with these particular shells, or at the very least larger ducks at minimum, I would say. But you've got a decently even spread to work with, although you do have bigger voids and stuff like top left of that blue target there. So I would say inside of 40 yards is where that combo is going to shine, probably right about the 30-ish yard range. Now moving to the improved cylinder, we see an immediate tightening down of the spread, definitely more of them across the duck target and right below it. We still have a few scattered pellets around the edges to contend with, but definitely a much more condensed area of shot. Perfectly adequate performance right there, although it is still a little bit splotchy. There are a couple little bit bigger holes in the pattern, but nothing detrimental necessarily. Now over to our modified choke. Definitely a very nice core area going on here. Cover that duck target in pellets, and it remains pretty even to just off the edges of it as well. We still do have a couple little scattered bits, but I think they're a little more broad in than what we saw with the improved cylinder. This is probably the type of pattern that I would go with if I was using these shells. You have less of those void areas while still having a pretty nice even core area. But finally, moving over to our full choke, we still have that really tight core area kind of right in front and below of that duck. So this might kind of start to be the limit where you're going to have a tighter core, but we start kind of scattering more pellets around the edges too in a little bit more splotchy manner. Probably starting to over constrict these a little bit with that full choke. No real surprise. It's a steel triple B shot pellet. I mean, obviously, if you like hot cores, that's still going to hammer, no question about it. But I think the modified choke is still my preferred option between these. Although none of them are bad patterns, and they would all certainly work for a variety of different situations, just depending on what your setup actually is. And now we've got all of our targets pulled down. I've got some big circles drawn across our patterns and all the pellets counted and stuff. Again, we'll get an up close look at each one here in just a second, but I'll pop up pictures of all four of these patterns side by side. Again, left to right, cylinder to full, and we can definitely see with these circles exactly what we were kind of looking at earlier. The cylinder bore is way more open than the rest. The improved cylinder is definitely an improvement for sure. We started to try and condense down and have a decently even little spread throughout the center. Our modified choke is probably the winner overall, which is exactly what I was looking at earlier as well. Nice even spread throughout the center of our circles there. That's got the most in the core area and probably the most even spread throughout the central portion of the pattern. And the full choke is pretty similar to the modified. However, we started to look like we were going the other way. Probably a little too much constriction. We had less of them in the core. It's not quite as even of a spread, although we do have a couple more in the little bit larger circle that we've got compared to the rest. So I'm still saying the modified is the winner here today. That would be my personal choice overall if I was running these shells. But we'll get an up close look now at them individually so we can see really what's going on. This is our cylinder bore pattern. These are 10 and 20-inch circles that I have drawn here. Within the 10-inch core, we only have 6 pellets, and out to the 20-inch, we only have 15 more pellets. So yet again, probably good enough to 40, but this is probably going to be that 30-yard and in sort of combination. Moving over to the improved cylinder, we picked up a good number of them through the core. We're now at 14 and 21 more within the 20-inch ring, but it's also still a little bit splotchy. You can see the right half of the core is a little thinner, and we have a couple thinner spots in the 20-inch ring as well. So better, but not perfect necessarily. But now moving over to the modified choke, now we've got kind of the best of both worlds here. We've got 21 in the core, and it's a decently even spread of them as well. We still have our handful of straggly stuff around the edges like we had in all of our patterns, but I think this is the best all-around performance overall. And then finally, the full choke. We started to go the other way just a little bit. We dropped off to 16 pellets in the core, and we're back to having a void in there as well. Although the 20-inch ring does fill in pretty evenly there with 27, which is the most. However, we started to really sling a few out towards the edges here, so this is probably starting to get a little too much constriction. Overall, backing up and looking at all of these, I would say these old Super Steel shells are a pretty decent performer. I mean, there's not really a bad pattern I see between any of these. It would just be different patterns for different setups and situations. I think my two favorite are the cylinder bore for close quarters type of setups, 20-25 yard decoys or something. And if I'm hunting over a river or something for some bigger geese, it's probably going to be the modified choke where you can reach out and touch them a little farther. Overall though, pretty solid performance for an old school shell. I wouldn't hesitate to run them. Even if these are 25, 30 years old or more, they would still kill bigger ducks and geese and stuff like that back then, the same as they would now. So pretty solid overall. Not a whole lot to really complain about. And here are the four wads out of those shells. From left to right is cylinder, improved cylinder, modified and full, but they all look pretty similar overall. No major damage or nothing between any of them. And they are pretty thick, beefy wads as well. Pretty stiff. You can't really flex them all that easily. So they held up all right. No pinholes or nothing like that. Even over here on the right with our full choke wad. Nothing at all I'm concerned with there as far as damaging the barrel or the choke or anything like that goes. And they clearly did their job just fine overall for us today. So nothing I'm concerned with here as far as the wads go. All right, well, what do we think about these performances here? I'd say the old Super Steel Triple B shells are a pretty decent performer overall. I don't know that I've ever tested a copper-plated steel load, so that may have made a little bit of a difference for us today. In doing some research online, I think the concept here kind of evolved into the modern day dry lock shells, and now that I think about it, maybe those might be copper-plated as well, potentially. I honestly can't remember exactly. I have tested some of those. I believe they were in 20 gauge, and they were some very nice performing shells, if that is indeed kind of the predecessor to what the old Super Steel shells were. Either way though, I don't know that I've ever ran across any of these Super Steel shells that I can remember anyway since I started buying ammo a number of years ago, but they seem to be a pretty good loading overall. They would make a fantastic goose loading. Maybe later in the season they're flying high out over a river or something like that. You could reach out there and touch them. It's a triple B pellet, so you're carrying a good amount of energy and stuff with it as well. Probably not a small duck load. There's better options for that with more pellets in the shell, but these could make a great goose load, and they could be a pretty mean little property type loading as well. Anything from getting rid of groundhogs to other vermins, possums, raccoons, stuff like that, all the way up into the fox and coyote territory out in the backyard. If they're trying to get into the chicken coop or something like that, it can make a good pest and vermin control load as well. But overall, they pattern nicely. They're not absolute hammers in the recoil department, although they're not a light load. They're not nearly the worst I've tested though. And they pattern well, especially through what seemingly looks like a modified choke being kind of the best option all around comparing to the rest of the chokes here anyway. So you have to let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Is this about what you expected to see? Were you a little surprised one way or the other? Have you ever run any of these old Super Steel loads? And if so, what kind of results have you seen? Are any of these a combination you would actually run? And if so, which choke option would you prefer? Do you like the little more open patterns down here, or do you like the little tighter patterns like the modified choke gave you? And what other stuff might you want to see us run with those shells? I've got a handful of them left, so if you got some other ideas, then let me know what you guys might want to see down below. But with that being said, I've got some more testing to get done for you guys, so I'm going to get back to it. As always, you have the channel Instagram as well as the mailbox where you can send stuff if you'd like. All that information will be in the description if you're interested in it. But I'm going to get back to it, so I'll see y'all in the next one.